Hi, this is Bedu-Addo, and we're going to resume with the sequel of games. We resume this week's podcast with a focus on the sequel of games, specifically looking into learning effects and looking into the quality of the sequel in comparison to the original. The game that we'll be studying is Ratchet & Clank 1 and 2. I played both of these games all the way back in 2002, and they were by far my favorite games. The plot is pretty straightforward. Clank, a defective robot, escapes Quartu, which is a warbot factory. He crash lands on Veldin, Ratchet's homeworld. Ratchet is a mechanic. The two join forces to try to break up Drek, a Bulgarian businessman who has evil intentions throughout the game. This initial game was so successful that it sparked 13 other games spanning 14 years. My main argument for this podcast is that sequels offer learning effects that make game comprehension easier and improves engagement with the game. This game was so successful that the game designers Insomniac brought this game over from the PS2 systems successfully to the PS3 and PS4 systems to continue the series. And the game was even so successful that it had a movie that had middle success in the box office. The first point I'd like to mention is that this game was one of the best games that I've played in my 18 odd years of gaming. It has violence, romance, racing, weapons, and skins to unlock, and strong plot development. But let's focus on the first point, violence. The game is admittedly violent, but not in the way that promotes any sort of violent tendencies. For example, the main character Ratchet starts the game with a wrench because, again, he's a mechanic, and as the game progresses, he gets to collect bolts because he's a mechanic, and these bolts serve as a form of currency. The more bolts that he has, the more he can buy new weapons and skins. However, although the premise of the game is based on violence, Ratchet is fighting fictional characters. Some of the weapons he can buy include a sheepinator that turns his opponents into sheep, and disco guns that make his opponents start to dance to music, which makes them really prone to attack. This is lighthearted and funny violence, and I think this is what G was getting at in his reading. Good video games and good learning. His main argument is that violence in video games does not translate into violence in real life. Video game makers rightfully use the rating system to let parents and players know what they should expect when playing these games. My main argument is that this game was largely a success because of the lighthearted fun of the violence. This is evident in the subsequent release of new sequels. If there were any real pushback about the violence in this game, it's more than likely that there would not have been 13 other successful sequels released. My second point is that I was motivated to buy the sequel because of the fun created in the game. In his reading, Making Learning Fun, Malone describes 4 individual motivations. These are challenge, control, fantasy, and curiosity. I'm only going to focus on challenge and fantasy for the portion of this podcast. With challenge, it was fun because we typically seek and enjoy activities that challenge us. The challenge came in the form of variable difficult levels and randomness like quicksand that could instantly kill you, or racing levels that kept the game light and refreshing. With fantasy, this level of fantasy, especially with animated characters, kept this game very fun. Because these characters are animated, it is easy to manipulate their actions, and you have an out-of-body and even an out-of-mind experience that kind of takes you away from the real stress of the world. The success of the Ratchet & Clank series is that they were able to sustain these motivations at a very high level, which kept me personally engaged and persuaded me to buy the subsequent sequel, Ratchet & Clank 2, which I'd argue also maintained a very high level of motivation that kept me playing and made me want to buy another sequel as well. My third point is that this game focused heavily on giving the player control, but also made sure that you knew if you're performing at a high level. Rigby and Ryan described the benefits of this in the reading Glued to Games. Specifically, they allude to games that have clear goals, useful performance feedback, and optimal challenges that stimulate but do not overwhelm us. And I think in large, the success of Ratchet & Clank 1 in building my foundational skills really primed me for success in Ratchet & Clank 2. A lot of that can be credited to the successful design of levels, difficulty of opponents, and challenge of being resourceful and trying to fully understand what game makers were trying to create when playing this game. My fourth point is that sequels implement the success of the original game while improving the bugs to make an even better sequel. This is highly evident, especially with the ability of skins. In Ratchet & Clank 1, new skins were hard to obtain because you had to choose between spending money on skins or spending money on weapons. And when I say skins, I mean armor. While the skins look cool, they didn't really improve Ratchet's strengths or abilities in any way. The game designers improved upon this existing idea by creating performance upgrades for Ratchet based on the skins he wore. And gave out some initial skins to incentivize the players to spend on skins rather than on weapons. This is similar to what G describes in his reading Learning by Design. Based on his customized principle, he argues that different styles of learning work better for different people and that they should be encouraged to try new styles. The game should be designed to allow different styles of learning and playing to work. And I think this is exactly what the game designers were able to achieve in the second game as a consequence of refining the original Ratchet & Clank 1, which substantially improved the game in the sequel. My fifth point is that sequels give the opportunity for character development, specifically the introduction of new and diverse characters. As Leanne mentions in her reading, No Girls Allowed, boys want superheroes, but so do girls. She mentions how marketers begin working with game developers to determine the game content and how it be represented to reach a wider audience. This is the power of sequels. In Ratchet & Clank 1, there was very minimal female representation in the game. Most of the opponents you faced were a breed of alien male characters, and the antagonist was a crooked male business tycoon, the furthest thing from attracting female attention. However, with every additional sequel, the game has begun to include more female characters and more female voice actors. This has definitely made the game more marketable to a wider audience. For instance, Ratchet & Clank has become one of my sister's favorite games because she used to watch me play and also wanted to get in on the fun. My sixth point is that sequels give players the ability to practice and build their talents. This is summarized perfectly by G's transfer principle. This states that learners are given ample opportunity to practice and are given support for transferring what they've learned earlier to later problems, including problems that require adapting and transforming that earlier learning. As with everything in life, practice makes perfect. The opportunities I have to practice with characters who I'm familiar with across multiple games makes me a better player. And this is not just with Ratchet & Clank, but with other games that release a new game every year, like FIFA or NBA 2K. All of these games allow a gamer to improve and hone their skills annually. My final point is that sequels are so successful because of the badging system. In his reading, 6 Ways to Look at Badging System Designed for Learning, Joseph argues that the digital badges are a form of achievement or qualification that a player needs to be able to succeed in a game, and that these systems are an alternative assessment model. Ratchet & Clank had in-game accomplishments and hidden items that gave you a greater experience in the game. You needed to finish all the objectives of a mission for every level in order to completely finish the game. To do this, a player was incentivized by the badges. This badge system was consistent across all the sequels, but it was also improved after each game as the game designers recognized the importance of rewarding players for their efforts in the game. To conclude, the point that I argued was that sequels improve the learning experience for gamers. To argue this point, I used the example of Ratchet & Clank 1 and 2, one of the best sequels of games that I've played. However, I could have argued this point with many other examples of sequels. As challenging as it is to follow up on a game that is an initial hit, I give a lot of credit to game creators who can successfully pull off an even better sequel. Sequels give gamers the familiarity of the same characters, knowledge of what works and doesn't work, and curiosity to try to explore the game further to spot the new additions of the game. And for these reasons, I'm a huge fan of sequels. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye.